It was supposed to be just another Tuesday morning. Karoline Leavitt had slipped on her favorite ivory blouse, clipped on her silver cross necklace, and tucked a worn-out leather journal into her purse. She loved this journal. It held the prayers she whispered during dark times, and the goals she had scribbled during the brightest. At 32, Karoline had known her fair share of struggle. She had worked double shifts through college, supported her sick father until his final breath, and had once lived off nothing but faith, oatmeal, and the hope that better days were coming. But life had turned a corner when she met William. Tall, quiet, principled, a man who listened more than he spoke and treated Karoline like the rarest gem. They married within a year, not because it was perfect timing, but because it was perfect love. William worked in finance, but you'd never know it from his modesty. Karoline had chosen not to work full-time after their wedding, instead volunteering at a local shelter and taking on part-time gigs to stay grounded in the community she adored. That's what brought her to Café Verde, a cozy cafe nestled in the heart of a trendy downtown district known more for its progressive slogans than its sense of community. Karoline liked the place. It was bustling, filled with artists, writers, and young professionals sipping oat milk lattes. She thought maybe she could bring something to it, her smile, her work ethic, her warmth. She had only been working there for 2 weeks when everything unraveled. It was just before the morning rush. Karoline was adjusting the pastry display when she noticed her manager, Trevor, approaching with a frown etched so deeply it looked carved. He was 30-something, sharp-jawed, and dressed like he belonged in a GQ editorial. His energy was brisk, commanding. But today, it felt icy. "Karoline," he said flatly. "Can I talk to you in the back?" She wiped her hands on her apron and followed him to the staff room, heart fluttering slightly. Was she being promoted? Had someone complained? Trevor shut the door and turned, arms crossed. "I've gotten a few customer complaints," he began. "And I need to ask you to remove your necklace." Karoline blinked. "My necklace?" "The cross," he clarified. "It's a bit triggering. We try to maintain a neutral, inclusive space here." She touched the chain gently, like shielding it from insult. "But it's personal. It's not about politics. It's a symbol of my faith." Trevor sighed, clearly annoyed. "This isn't up for debate. You can either remove it while working, or we'll have to reevaluate your position here." The air left her lungs. She felt like she was 12 again, when a teacher told her to stop talking about her father's illness because some students have it worse. She remembered the sting of silence forced upon her, how dignity felt like a luxury only others could afford. "I'm sorry, Trevor," she said, standing straighter. "But I'm not taking it off." And just like that, she was fired. No severance, no handshake, no apology. Just the cold slap of a door closing behind her as she walked out, head high, hands shaking, necklace still shining in the morning sun. Karoline wandered aimlessly down Main Street, unsure whether to cry or scream. She found a bench near the library, collapsed into it, and stared at her trembling fingers. How could something so small, so deeply personal, be seen as offensive? She scrolled through her phone, debating whether to tell William. Her thumb hovered over his contact before she locked the screen. She needed to process this alone first. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea. William noticed her silence, the way she stared at the steam instead of sipping. Eventually, she told him everything, each word heavy with disbelief and humiliation. When she finished, William simply reached for her hand. "You did nothing wrong," he said firmly. "I'm proud of you." "But what if they spin it?" she whispered. "What if people say I was being difficult?" "Let them talk," he replied. "Let them see who you really are." The next morning, Karoline didn't expect what she saw outside their window, William's Rolls-Royce, which he almost never drove, polished and parked in the driveway. A chauffeur stood beside it, gloved hands resting on the door. And then came the note. Short. Direct. Loving. Be ready by 9. Wear that cross proudly. Let the world see what grace looks like. Karoline stood frozen for a moment. She clutched the note, heart pounding, and realized something remarkable: she wasn't ashamed. She was angry, but also inspired. She had been wronged. And she had a voice. Little did she know, her story was about to explode. William had quietly shared what happened with a friend who ran a podcast. That friend tweeted a few sentences, nothing dramatic, just the truth. But within hours, it had been shared by influencers, pastors, mothers, and even a few celebrities. One post read, "She was kicked out for wearing a cross." The next day, her husband picked her up in a Rolls-Royce. That's how you honor a woman with backbone. And suddenly, the world started watching. Reporters called. People sent letters of support. Strangers offered job interviews, and churches reached out with open arms. But for Karoline, it wasn't about revenge. It was about something deeper. She realized the cafe didn't break her, it freed her. It stripped away the illusion that she had to hide her faith, her values, or her roots to belong. It reminded her that no one gets to define her worth, but God. That's when William proposed something radical. "What if," he said one evening, "you started your own cafe?" Karoline laughed. "Me? I've only ever worked at one." "But you know how to serve people," he said, eyes bright. "You make them feel seen. You bring light to dark rooms. That's more than most business owners can do." She bit her lip, nervous, but something inside her stirred. Maybe this firing wasn't the end, it was the beginning. In that moment, she understood, what had felt like a cruel dismissal was, in truth, an invitation. An invitation to rise. Karoline had always believed that things happened for a reason, but she had never imagined that being fired for wearing a cross would be the spark that changed everything. After the viral post about her dismissal took off, her inbox flooded. There were messages from mothers in Georgia, veterans in Texas, pastors in Ohio. Some shared their own stories of religious discrimination. Others just wanted her to know she wasn't alone. But the message that struck her most came from a teenage girl named Abigail. "Dear Ms. Leavitt, I saw what happened to you. Last year, I was told by my teacher not to bring my Bible to school. I cried that night. I thought being a Christian meant being quiet. But you showed me that kindness doesn't mean silence. Thank you." Karoline sat with that letter for hours, her fingers tracing the ink, her heart heavy with purpose. She could no longer go back to the life she knew, the quiet volunteer work, the part-time jobs. Something larger was calling. So when William said the words again, "start your own cafe," she didn't laugh this time. She said yes. The search for the right building was more difficult than expected. Realtors showed them polished spaces in trendy neighborhoods, but none felt right. Karoline wanted warmth. She wanted heart. And she wanted walls that could echo stories, not just trendy playlists. They finally found it, a brick building on the edge of town, neglected but standing strong, like it had been waiting for someone to love it again. The front windows were dusty. The floors needed replacing. But when Karoline stepped inside, she whispered, "This is it." William bought it the next day. The renovations began with a skeleton crew, a few trusted contractors, Karoline's best friend Lila, and a few neighborhood teens looking for weekend work. But as the weeks passed, more and more volunteers showed up. Some had heard her story online. Others were just drawn in by the way she smiled when handing out iced tea to the workers. "This place is going to be more than a cafe," Karoline told William one evening. "It's going to be a refuge." They named it the table, because Karoline wanted everyone to feel like they had a seat. She made it her mission to hire people others overlooked. She brought in a single dad who had just come out of rehab. A grandmother raising her grandchildren. A quiet young man with autism who had been rejected from 6 interviews because of his communication struggles. She trained them all with patience and grace. The menu was simple: coffee, homemade pastries, and warm, comforting food, mac and cheese, tomato soup, cornbread with honey butter. Karoline made sure there were no extras for oat milk or substitutions. No rules that made people feel like burdens. Just hospitality. One wall was dedicated to a blessings board. Customers could write down their favorite scriptures, gratitude notes, or prayers for strangers. Karoline watched in awe as the wall filled up, day after day, little paper scraps becoming a mosaic of hope. Meanwhile, the backlash continued to swirl in some corners of social media. Accusations were made. People called her divisive, said she was playing the victim, accused her of turning faith into politics. Karoline never responded. She didn't need to. Every smile inside her cafe was a louder rebuttal than any tweet could ever be. One afternoon, as she restocked mugs behind the counter, she noticed a familiar figure standing near the door: Trevor. The manager who had fired her. He stood awkwardly, hands in pockets, eyes not quite meeting hers. "Hey," he said. Karoline nodded. "Hi." Trevor glanced around the cafe, taking in the laughter, the light jazz playing overhead, the gentle bustle of people gathered in peace. "This is, wow. It's beautiful." She waited. "I came to apologize," he finally said. "I handled things badly. I thought I was protecting the cafe's brand, but I realize now. I lost sight of people." Karoline's heart softened, but her expression stayed calm. "I forgave you a long time ago, Trevor." He looked stunned. "You did?" "I had to," she said. "Holding on to pain would have kept me stuck in that moment. But letting go, it gave me this." Trevor nodded, eyes shining. "You turned pain into purpose. That's powerful." As he left, Karoline felt something in her soul click into place. Not victory. Not vengeance. Just peace. Later that month, the table held its grand opening. Local media covered the story. National media mentioned it briefly. But the most powerful coverage came from the people themselves, photos posted with captions like, "This place made me believe again," and "I haven't felt this safe in years." The cafe became a movement. Karoline was invited to speak at conferences. She started a podcast called Grace at the Table, where she interviewed everyday people with extraordinary stories. She donated part of the profits to fund scholarships for students who had been expelled or marginalized for expressing their faith. One night, as she sat beside William on their back porch, watching fireflies flicker, she turned to him with tears in her eyes. "Do you ever wonder why it had to happen like that?" she asked. William leaned back. "Sometimes we don't get to choose the fire. But we do get to choose whether we burn, or rise." She smiled. "I chose to rise." A year had passed since Karoline had walked out of Café Verde, her cross necklace catching the morning light, her dignity intact. That one act of quiet defiance had blossomed into something she never could have imagined. The table had grown into more than just a cafe. It had become a beacon. On the anniversary of its opening, Karoline stood in front of the blessings board, now covered from edge to edge in handwritten notes, prayers, and verses from all walks of life. It was a living mural of humanity's longing for connection, for understanding, for hope. A little girl tugged at her apron. "Miss Karoline, can I put mine up too?" Karoline knelt beside her and smiled. "Of course you can, sweetheart. What does it say?" The girl held up a note written in big, clumsy letters: "Thank you for making my mommy smile again." Karoline blinked back tears. She gently took the girl's hand and helped her pin it to the board, right in the center. That moment reminded her, this, not money, not revenge, not even success, this was why she stood her ground. This was why she kept her necklace on. Later that evening, the cafe closed early for a private gathering. Former staff, current employees, customers turned friends, and even those who had once criticized her filled the room, sharing stories of how the table had changed them. One man who had been homeless now owned a small cleaning business. A young woman who had once been addicted to drugs was now mentoring others. The cafe wasn't just a place to eat, it was a place to heal. Karoline took the small stage near the fireplace. She looked over the crowd, so many eyes filled with gratitude, and cleared her throat. "I was fired for wearing a symbol of love," she began. "And for a moment, I believed that maybe love wasn't welcome in certain places anymore. But then I realized, it's not the world's job to welcome love. It's our job to bring it. To carry it. To build with it." She paused. "You see, kindness doesn't mean silence. Humility doesn't mean invisibility. And faith, it isn't fragile. It doesn't need protection. It needs courage. It needs action." The room was silent, hanging on every word. "We all have a seat at the table," Karoline said, voice trembling slightly. "No matter who you are, what you believe, or where you've been. You matter. You belong. And you are loved." Applause erupted, not thunderous, but warm, deep, like the sound of 100 hearts beating in unison. William stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, a proud smile softening his usual stoicism. He had never wanted attention. But tonight, he felt a quiet joy in knowing that the Rolls-Royce that had once symbolized success had instead become a symbol of something far greater, standing up for someone you love. That night, as Karoline turned off the lights and locked the front door, she paused and looked at the sign hanging above the entrance. "The table. All are welcome." She reached up, gently touched the tea that William had carved himself, and whispered a prayer of thanks, not for the cafe, not for the attention, but for the moment she had chosen not to take off her cross. Because that moment, though painful, led her here. To purpose. To peace. To something eternal. And somewhere, far beyond the headlines and opinions, a little girl named Abigail saw Karoline's story and decided to carry her Bible to school the next day. She stood a little taller. Smiled a little brighter. And when someone questioned her, she didn't argue, she simply said, "There's room for you at the table too." And just like that, the ripple continued. Because sometimes, all it takes is one woman refusing to take off her cross for the world to remember where true strength lives. In grace. In love. And in the courage to stand tall, no matter who tries to dim your light.